Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So once again, we get to dive into my favorite aspect of PvE in the game, another challenge tournament, specifically single faction dragon tournament. Now we had one of these last month. It was the same thing, single faction, but in the Spider's Den, which is arguably more difficult. Dragon is a bit more straightforward and easier to get through, as we'll touch on here in a little bit. But nonetheless, it's a brand new concept for the realm of challenge tournaments. So let's dive into the tournament itself and talk about whether or not it's worth your while. Starting from the top, you can get yourself a free summon from the soul summon pool going on right now. We can take a quick look at that. I never really talk about these just because it's kind of, whale cracking territory. There's a lot of champions up for grabs here, legendaries and epics, and you only get one summon, and then you can get either between a 2 and a 6 star for legendaries and a 4 and a 6 star for epics. And so the odds of you getting the particular soul for the one champion that you want of the right rarity is just ridiculously unlikely, and so I don't tend to discuss these that much. However, it is noteworthy that that is the top reward here on the right hand side of the Dragon tournament. But more importantly, if you're going for some bits of the Titan event, you probably want to get the 60 Titan event points here up for grabs as well. And then I always like to mention that if you do have a relatively easy group, you should check to make sure that if your group is not already at 4,000 points on the first day, then maybe you could take the dub here and get yourself some 6-star relentless gear, which is hard to come by, relatively speaking. And then to top it all off, even if you don't care about the challenge tournament in and of itself or any of the rewards, it is still a good time to be running Dragon because it is a 3x on speed gear. So you could try, I do recommend that you try to double dip here, participate in the tournament with whatever team you can come up with, and then you can get the benefits of the 3x on speed, on top of getting the rewards, on top of potentially winning the tournament if your group is relatively empty. Now, in terms of stages that you can farm, like I mentioned earlier, Dragon is the easiest of the 4 core dungeons, and so I could recommend, or I do recommend, that you try your luck relative to hard mode just to see how far you can go if you have a good team concept, and we'll discuss team concepts a little bit later. But if all else fails, there is no harm in dropping back down into normal mode, doing stage 25 if you want the best gear quality, stage 20 if you want the most efficient stage in terms of points per energy, and then if all else fails, stage 16 can work. Or if you're in the earlier game, then it's just Void Affinity. It's a lot easier to do, and you can kind of just blitz through with basically any composition of champions from the same faction. Now, in my particular case, I do happen to have basically all of the best poisoners from the Knights Revenant faction, so that is what I built my personal team around. This is the team that I will be running for the duration of this tournament. So we have Calvalax in there for his passive, we have Theodore in there for his active abilities, we have Tomb Lord in there for his poisons, we have Narma in there for activation, and then we have Renegade in there to reset so we can blow up the waves relatively quickly and then get on to the boss. So I'll show you guys this run really quickly. Obviously, most of you won't be able to perfectly replicate this exact team unless you have these exact champions in similar builds, but just for proof of concept of kind of poison explosion. This is kind of like peak of what you could possibly do when it comes to this, unless you're running some other strategies that we'll talk about later. So poison, activate. We get poisons out there again, a little bit of activation from Theodore. This time Narma puts out her poisons, Renegade does the reset, and then we come back around to Narma once again to pop all of those poisons, and then we're set up. After 20 seconds, we get to the boss, poisons, and then poisons. And then at this point, for this particular team, we're taking advantage of the fact that Narma can extend debuffs on her A1, and Calvalax can also extend debuffs on his A1. So we're just kind of hoping that they can do a couple of those. You can see increased debuff duration there, one big nuke. Dragon takes a turn, Theodore does something there, and then Narma comes and finishes it out with her active. I guess Theodore is in reflex there, so we got a reflex proc on his activation, so we got back to it sooner than expected. But nonetheless, that's the team. It's under a minute, and honestly, it's pretty darn close to my actual team in terms of the speed, but my actual team's a little bit faster. But a lot of these champions are kind of the same between those two teams. Obviously, I have a Kymar for a pure reset, so the waves are a little bit faster, and then other such things. Now, because it's customary, I will go over the builds on the champions, but I do want to once again mention that you probably won't be able to replicate this exact team. But in case you happen to have some of the champions, maybe this could provide some inspiration. So Renegade, she's not really in gear. The sets don't really matter, but she just has enough speed to kind of take a turn, and her one turn in wave 2 is all she needs to do, and her stats really don't matter. She's still 5-star on my account. Never really had a reason to 6-star her, unfortunately for her. But yeah, no relic. She is booked because she's a rare, and then no masteries because I basically don't use her anymore. She's just kind of sitting around. She fit the bill in this particular instance, but I don't really use her that much. Narma the Returned, I feature her, like I mentioned, in my primary dragon team. So I have her in a high accuracy, high resistance combo build. And so we have 2-piece Stone Skin, which is effectively a resistance set, 2-piece Perception, the resistance set, and then 1 piece of Feral. Her total stats, 78,000 on the HP, 3,400 on the defense, 256 on the speed, 484 on the resistance, 366 on the accuracy. The targets there being 450 plus to resist any debuffs that the waves or the dragon might put on us, and then 350 plus accuracy to make sure that we land our debuffs against the waves as well as the dragon. In terms of relic, don't have one on her. She is fully booked, even though it is painfully a painfully large amount of books, but on my account it was worth it. That might not be the case for you. And then in terms of masteries here, this is what I'm rocking here with the defense tree and the support tree. Notably there is Oppressor is the T6, so she gets a little bit faster turn meter fill when it comes to the stuff. And if you need to deep dive the masteries there, you can pause the video and take a deeper look. Next up, we have Tomb Lord. We've probably seen this many times on my account, but yeah, Perception and Immortal, she's just kind of in a smattering of gear, nothing too crucial, but 68,000 on the HP, 4,500-ish on the attack, 2,900-ish on the defense, 285 on the speed. He is the fastest on this team. Full crit rate, a little bit of crit damage, and then once again, enough accuracy to do the job. 350 plus, 382 specifically on him. He does have an Arachnid Elixir. It does a little bit more damage, or his poisons do a little bit more damage relative to his attack, but it's not gonna kind of break the bank because he is a support at the end of the day, and his base attack is only 1,300. Still substantial compared to other supports who are like hard supports, but nonetheless, it's not as much as Kavlak, so we'll see a little bit later. In terms of masteries here, the kind of standard debuffer stuff, the right hand side of the support tree, the left hand side or crescent moon of the offense tree. That way we get down to Giant Slayer because he does have a triple hitter on the A1. Next up, we have my Kavalax, who is in Savage and Perception. The Savage is because he's a nuker on my Spider team as well. But for this particular team, it doesn't really matter. He could just be fast and feral or whatever arena build you might have on him. Oops. In terms of the stats here, we have 35,000 on the HP, or yeah, super squishy. He doesn't really need to survive. He just needs to do damage or do his poisons. 64 or 6,500 almost on the attack, 2,700 on the defense, 236 on the speed, full crit rate, 255 on the crit damage, and then 382 once again on the accuracy, 350 plus being the target. This is not an arena build. This is a PvE build, so keep that in mind here. In terms of the relic, of course, the Arachnid Elixir on him, much more potent. He has 1,600 base attack, and that scales a lot better, and he is built with relatively high attack. And then he is fully booked as a legendary. And then the masteries here, Flawless Execution is what I went on him because I use him as effectively an enemy max HP nuker against the spider, and more crit damage just does more damage. And then standard debuff for stuff once again on the support tree, kind of hugging the right hand side, Master Hexer, Sniper, all of that jazz. And then last but not least, we have my utility Theodore the Savant, who's in a reflex set, which I mentioned during the run, then Perception alongside of that. Once again, a high accuracy, high resistance build. Even though the stats are a little bit short of what they should be, it's close enough for most of the runs. 65,000 on the HP, 3,800 on the defense, 257 on the speed, so just one speed faster than Narma. That is deliberate. 438 on the resistance, 450 plus being the target, so we're a little bit short, and then 345 on the accuracy, 350 plus being the target, again a little bit short, but close enough. He does have a relic on him, the Golden Elixir, so he gets a little bit of healing. He is fully booked. He does have a Brimstone as the blessing. And then for the masteries, similar to Narma, the defense tree and the support tree, once again going down through Master Hexer down to Oppressor to increase his turn meter fill rate. And I guess I forgot to mention the blessings along the way. I did mention the Brimstone on Theodore. I have Hero Soul on Kavlax. Again, this is specifically for the Spider dungeon, so he does more damage to the Spiderlings because, of course, Spider are hard. You do need to kill the spiders. Phantom Touch on Tomb Lord because I do use him in Fire Knight stuff, and then Narma does not have a blessing. She is fair. And then Renegade, I just put Nature's Bounty on her, but again, she's not really doing anything with that. So yeah, that is my team, but let's talk about how you guys can build a team for your account if you're interested in this challenge. So let's go faction by faction and kind of highlight which factions are kind of better suited for building a team. And for this, I'm going to focus on the primary sources of damage relative to dragon. Most dragons, if not all dragons in the game, are immune to turn meter reduction effects as well as decreased speed. So one of the best ways to damage them is poisons, because they will take their turns no matter what, because you cannot affect or manipulate their turn meter. And so if you just stack them out with poisons, every time they get a turn, they will take damage. But moreover, if you have poison explosion alongside that, you can also speed up the run because you're detonating the poisons that are on them, and therefore you don't have to necessarily wait for them to take their turn. So we're going to be focusing on the poison champions in each faction, but I'll also mention some of the enemy max HP champions that you could use depending upon the stage you're farming. Obviously, if you're going stage 21 normal mode and beyond into hard mode, they're capped at 10%. But if you're farming stage 20, then you can go into some of the, relatively speaking, old school strategies of just kind of nuking the boss down with enemy max HP, loads of crit damage, etc. So let's dive right in, starting off with the Banner Lords. The one pick that might surprise people who aren't aware of exactly how it works is Stultus Dragonbane. His passive is just really, really cool because whenever an enemy attempts to place decreased defense, weaken, or poisons on him, he reflects them back to the attacker. So he does not technically have poisons in his kit, but when you get to the dragon, he is immune to poisons and the dragon will poison himself instead. So you can craft a team, and all you have to do is get a Stultus to the dragon and he will attack you, poison himself, and then slowly but surely he will die to his own poison. So again, I'm skipping over the part where you guys can come up with a team that can get him to the boss, and you can hopefully figure that out for yourselves. Richtof the Bold does have this ability here. He attacks an enemy 3 times, and each hit will place a poison on all enemies for 3 turns. So an AoE triple hitter, or sorry, an AoE triple poison placing ability, which is good for poison explosion setup. However, there is no poison exploder in this particular faction, so you could just go and place the poisons and see what that does, or you can carry both of these champions to the dragon and see what happens. And then honorable mention to Septimus, old school but definitely power crept enemy max HP nuker. If you're running stage 20, he could be kind of cool to kind of one-shot the dragon. Granted, you might have some affinity issues. Moving down to the High Elves, we have Eleanor, one of my dream girls who I never managed to get on my account. But she has poisons in her kit, double hitter, AoE, double poison, but she's also a poison combustion champion, which is a good combination. But also irresistible HP burn on the A1, which can also be a good source of damage on the dragon. Again, you can't manipulate turn meter, so if you get the burn and poisons on there on him, then he's going to take damage from that. Unfortunately, she's kind of alone in terms of poisons, useful poisons in this faction. So that is a bit of a bummer. However, in terms of enemy max HP, you do have Wallmaster Athar, and does have a double hitter, enemy max HP hit. And then when you come down to the epics, you still have good old Warrior Guard with his big enemy max HP hit as well. Moving on to Sacred Order. This is where things get a lot more juicy. So you have Corvus the Corruptor, who can place AoE poisons here on his A3. Granted, it is on a 4-turn cooldown, but it is a decent amount of poisons and poison sensitivity. Of course, we all have got Ezio for free, so he can be a poison placer as well as a poison activator, depending upon the amount of debuffs on the target. So he can definitely help with the speedrun compositions, and Corvus plus him are a very, very strong combo that will work extremely well. And then if we move down to the epics, you do have also Eothar, who does have this ability here 4 times at random, but once you get to the boss, this is effectively 4 poisons on a 3-turn cooldown on a single target. Now, because we are trying to cover all of our bases here with strategies, I do want to also mention the champions who can transfer debuffs to other enemies. And so Sanguinia here, if you build her with accuracy, this ability on a 4-turn cooldown, it will transfer all debuffs from this champion to the target, and it also serves as a cleanse of all allies. So that once again, the dragon puts poisons on her, she attacks him with this ability with enough accuracy, she transfers all the poisons from herself back to the dragon, but also cleanses all the debuffs, all the poisons off of all of your allies as well. So that's a cool way to once again kind of throw the poisons back at the boss. And then for enemy max HP, probably not the best champion to use, but if all else fails and you're really struggling and you're really committed, I should say, to Sacred Order, then Armiger can come in and uncommon on a 2-turn cooldown with his enemy max HP scaling damage there. So super cool. Shout out for Armiger. Next up, we have Ogryn Tribes. This is another faction that does have a good density of poison, poison and poison explosion champions. If you're fortunate enough to have Vizig, the faction unity champion, he does have this really strong ability here that places 2 poisons as well as HP burn. And then on his A1, whenever he uses it, he has a chance to instantly activate poisons and HP burns on enemies, i.e. the dragon and or the waves, so he can be poison explosion effectively for the team. But of course, there's also Stock the Broken, who can bring some poisons himself with this ability here, the A3, but he can also activate ticks of poisons and HP burn with his A2. So that tandem is extremely strong and probably similar to kind of what we showed here with my team as far as Nice Revenant goes in terms of poisons and poison explosion. Alongside them, honorable mention to Girder Bogbro, who is a daily log and reward champion who does have this ability here that can place 2 poisons on an AoE, as well as being a partial cleanse. And then of course for the epics, tried and true epic here, Mini Battle Khazar with Eurogrim here with this ability here on a 4-turn cooldown granted, but still another source of 2 AoE poison. So you can run a lot of poison champions together if you have the cards in terms of the Ogryn tribes. And then when it comes to enemy max HP, technically Klazag can work, but Dragon is such a quick fight that I don't really think you're going to get to take full advantage of this passive, but nonetheless it could be kind of fun. And then Grisor is kind of the more obvious one, where we hit enemy max HP on a 3-turn cooldown here, but again, you're probably not going to get that much use out of this unless you're running a relatively low stage of normal mode. Next up, we have Lizardmen, which I would not necessarily recommend unless you're in a very, very specific category. So Dracomorph technically does have it. This is kind of like Aothar, who we talked about earlier, 4 times at random, but once you get to the boss, this is effectively 4 poisons, and they do last for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown, so they're very strong duration. Anyone who happens to have Chigor, you have AoE poison here plus decreased defense, so you can deal damage as well. Good for the waves, good for setting up. And but you know, he's a void legendary, so you probably don't have him. I definitely don't myself. And then technically also you do have Venom H here, AoE poisons here, and then she can pop poisons on her A1, but it's only like 2 of them, so it's not as effective as other methods. And again, there's not a ton of poison champions in this faction. You know, Delaja has it on her A1, for example, but there's not a ton of poison options that kind of synergize well with them, and so I definitely don't recommend specifically Lizardmen for this task. But if that's all you have, then maybe you can make it work. So not going to shoot down anyone's ideas. Next up, we have Skinwalkers, and there's actually no legendary poisoners here, but it is worth mentioning that Bambus, and the way his passive works, is that he will transfer debuffs on an ally to this champion when he's under sleep, and then whenever he wakes up, he will transfer those debuffs to the enemy with the highest resistance. So once again, the only target when you get to the dragon is going to be the dragon, so you're going to take all the debuffs, all the poisons from everyone else, and then throw them on the dragon once he wakes you up, or you wake yourself up. Either way. So that could be another way to transfer poisons from your team back to the dragon. And then in terms of enemy max HP, of course, Marius. There's a lot of teams that can probably just, or a lot of people that can just run their Marius and just solo with some food and kind of get through it. So that is always an option for those of you who have a strong enough Marius build. Next up, we have Orcs, another faction that I don't really recommend. There's not that much poisoners. There's no legendary specific ones to point out. Then you have Laberga, who's kind of like a frozen banshee, where she can place 2 poisons of poison sensitivity, you know, but it's a single target, so you kind of carry her to the boss. She could do a little bit of poison damage, but don't really recommend that unless you really want to run your Seer in some sort of composition, because she is, of course, enemy max HP. This could blow up the waves relatively quickly. However, there's not a good way to reset and do that within the faction itself. But those are 2 honorable mentions for the Orcs. But again, don't recommend the Orcs specifically for this challenge. Next up, we have Demon Spawn. And Demon Spawn can be quite interesting. If you really want to go like super off meta, then Urtikata is a very intriguing champion who, like, I just 6-starred because I think she's cool, but I've actually never used her in anything. And I thought about using her for this, but that's where I was kind of calling my name. But I digress. So she can place Hex here on the target, or on targets at random, but the main thing is when there's a target under Hex, and whenever she lands a critical hit or anyone else lands a critical hit, there's a chance to place poison. So she effectively turns your entire team, or at least anyone who is full crit rate on your team, into poison champions with her passive alone. And then she also brings poison sensitivity as well to amplify the damage of the poison. So that could be cool, so that you don't actually need poisoners on your team. You just need her. Again, treat her like a frozen banshee. You carry her to the dragon in whatever way is quick, and then everyone on your team who crits becomes a poisoner for the dragon. So that can be a really cool out of the box composition. But in the continuing on with the trend of the transfer type of champions here, we have Skimfos the Consumed. He can steal debuffs from all of your allies, effectively cleanse and put them on himself. Granted, poisons, you know, they tick down when you take turns, so that might not be as expedient. But the bread and butter here is that on this ability, even though you can't steal the turn meter, you can still transfer all the debuffs from himself to the dragon. So you can take your poisons and put them on dragon, throw them right back. Next up, we have the Undead Horde. So now we're back to kind of solo-esque champions if you're running normal mode or anything kind of simpler with some food. Bad Alcazar, super old school champion, super straightforward. He cleanses, puts 2 continuous heals, and places 2 poison on everyone else. So he can basically self-sustain with the heals and then poison the waves to death and poison the dragon to death as well. Kind of relatively slow sometimes, but it could also be pretty quick depending upon the speed of your battle Khazar. And then we've mentioned her name a few times, but Frozen Banshee, if you do take time to get her to the boss, you can place poison sensitivity here on her A3 on a 3-turn cooldown, and then just spam the A1 to place poisons as long as they're under their poison sensitivity. So that can be a way as long as you get her to the dragon. Very old school way, but again, for this type of stuff, if that's your one option to get it done, then it will definitely work. Dark Elves can be quite interesting depending upon who you happen to have on your account. So you have Noct the Paralyzer, who has poisons here, 2 AoE, and then once they wake up from the sleep that he places, you get 2 more, so effectively 4 poisons. You have Xenomorph, who everyone got for free. You can spam poisons on his A1, lots of them, or 3 poisons if he crits, which is really easy to do. But also his passive, whenever you're attacked, you're going to place poisons on the dragon, so he's a really, really good kind of Frozen Banshee-esque champion who just spams his A1 once you get to the dragon, but also the Infest can help clear the waves. Zavia, of course, AoE poison here on her A2, and then poison explosion here on the A3. Super strong, kind of comparable to Eleanor in that form and that function. And then we have honorable mention to Mithrala. She can cleanse, which is good for dealing with the dragon's debuffs on you, but also she could just spam her A1 and place poisons on the dragon continuously just by doing that. Then we also have the Kales, all the Kales. So we have Supreme Kale, who you don't really need to build any accuracy on, but he can place 3 AoE poisons, big version, and then also increase the duration of debuffs, which is strong, so that makes these poisons last for a very, very long time, which is good, and they can't be resisted. But you also have Dark Kale, who is more so for a setup, wave setup type things. You can use this ability, the A2, to extend the duration of debuffs. So if there are already poisons out there, he can make them 1 turn longer, which is a good setup once again for Poison Explosion. But then when you get to the dragon yourself, single target, you can place 3 poisons and poison sensitivity on the target. So really strong there. And then if you're really desperate, OG Kale can work as well. And then while we're here, in terms of enemy max HP, we do have the tried and true Cold Heart. Again, if you're doing a relatively lower stage of normal, you can kind of just try, not necessarily one shot, but do a lot of damage to the boss with the enemy max HP scaling abilities. Knights Rev, we'll run through these really quickly, but you saw most of them on my team. Narma the Returned, poisons, and also poison explosion. We have Tomb Lord with the poisons, Geodor with the poisons and partial poison explosion. Kavlax with his passive places a bunch of poisons. That is pretty much it when it comes to the Knights Revenant. The Dwarves don't actually have a poisoner when it comes to the legendaries and or the epics, but I do want to throw out, of course, you can run Newts. Again, if you're running a relatively lower level of normal mode, Newt can probably just one-shot the boss with the triple hitter enemy max HP. But if you're running higher levels, he can still do the 10% or 30% of the HP because of the enemy max HP gap. So I do expect some people will be running some sort of triple, quadruple Newt, whatever compositions, and be able to just kind of one-shot the dragon from the top. Next up, we have the Shadowkin, which is somewhat interesting, and they're really not poisoners in the traditional sense. We have a lot of reflecting stuff going on here in this faction as well. So Jingwan, the bane of a lot of our existences in hard-won faction wars, he does have the same thing ability, or the same similar ability, where he can transfer debuffs from this champion back to the target. So all you have to do is use your A1 anytime and every time the dragon poisons you, and then you poison him. It really works extremely well with avenging sets and or retaliation sets, so that you don't even have to take a turn. You just counterattack automatically and throw the poisons back. So he can, another champion who can kind of solo, so to speak, once you get to the dragon. And then honorable mention to Yumiko. Of course, she's well known for the reset and lockout on her A3, but when she places Hex on enemies, there's a really high chance that it will redirect debuffs from herself or your allies back to the placer. So as long as you have Hex on the dragon, most of the time he's going to place AoE poison on himself. So that could be another way to reflect it back to him. And then honorable mention, I don't recommend you use her, but nonetheless, it's worth mentioning that she does have a single target triple hitter here that can place poisons on each hit. And then she can also pop 1 take of poisons on her A3. But Frozen Banshee-esque, once again, you get her to the boss and you can poison and poison activate a little bit, but I think you're probably better off picking a different faction if that is your going in plan. And last but not least, we have the Sylvan Watchers. Of course, Argonauts are new, but they don't have any poisoners so far in the faction, so I don't really recommend trying that at all unless you just want to go with raw damage. But King Galkabar, honorable mention. I don't think this really works because you have to remove buffs and then you replace them with poisons. And so if they don't have any buffs, i.e. you're going before the waves take turns, I don't actually think he places any poisons, but I could be wrong on that. Green Warden Ruark, it works exactly the same way as Jingwan, so he transfers debuffs back. Again, with the Avenging set, Retaliation set, you just throw the poisons right back without necessarily having to take a turn. And then, of course, there is Balar the Lost, who has a poison detonation here on his A2, and a lot of AoE poisons here on his A3. But notably, he also has a lot of turn meter filling when poisons are placed, so he can definitely get cut in and cut ahead and stay ahead of the enemies by placing all of his poisons or having other people place poisons on your team. And then a poison sensitivity on the A1. And I guess honorable mention to Kaldor. I don't exactly remember everything in his kit. It's a laundry list of stuff, but he does have some interaction with poisons and continuous heals in his kit. But he's once again faction unity, so you probably don't have access to him on your account. So there you have it. There's a quick summary of all of the meta damage sources relative to Dragon, the poisoners and other equivalents, and then the enemy max HP champions you can deal damage here. As far as which factions I think are the best suited that you'd have the easiest time using, definitely like the Stultus compositions because those are pretty darn clean. High Elves with Elnaril, that could definitely work. Sacred Order, Corvus, Ezio are strong contenders. Ogren Tribes, lots of options there between Stock and Eurogrim, Gerda, and Vizig. And then Bambus is good for skinwalkers, or you can just Marius the way through. And then the Dark Elves, there's a lot of options depending upon who you have. And then Knights Rev, of course, is super strong. But I also just say the Green Ward, Ruark, and then the Jingwan compositions can work as well because those are pretty straightforward. Get them to the boss and just spam your A1 whenever you get poisons. All right, so that's going to do it for my strategy for the single faction Dragon tournament. Let me know in the comment section down below what team you're going to be running, if assuming you're going to be participating in this tournament at all. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel. And feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well, if and only if you're enjoying the content overall on this channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good one.